Hi, this is Noyes, your oil painting instructor. Here's my name and information, so you know by now to only text me, not email or call. So today we're going to be doing landscape, so I want to introduce our landscape theme and some of the techniques. So as always, you're going to do your thumbnail sketch, and these are the techniques that you need to incorporate into your landscape. So we're going to do clouds, glide and slide, sky, trees, water, water reflection, mountain, hills, road, and something that's impressionistic. So let's get started. First, what I'd like you to do is actually go and take some photographs. You might do a whole collection because maybe I like that mountain, but I like that tree, I like that reflection, but I like this branch coming over here. So we want you to make it your idea, your composition, things that you like. So that would be step number one. So go out with your phone, take some pictures, get them printed off. We have a computer lab here, so you can print them off here, and start to compile what you like the best. And then number two is we're going to practice all the sample sheets, all these techniques before you get started. So as you're doing these sample sheets, I want you to think about what would I do first, second, third, fourth, and so forth. So you have an idea in mind, and you could make notes of those. So after you have your samples, you can start to really compose your thumbnail. So this is like your architectural blueprint. It tells me what you're thinking, and you do have to go off 3 edges. So these are clouds. These clouds go off here, so that counts as 1. 2 edges, and this goes off this edge. So that would be 3 edges. So we want you to fill this up, not just one little thing in the middle. So you actually get a point for that. So you get a point for doing your thumbnail. You get a point for doing the assignment as long as it has all these techniques in it. It has to go off 3 edges. That's another point. Another point for keeping your area nice and clean. You know how to dispose of toxic materials. We don't throw anything down the sink, remember? Or if you're at home, do not throw turpentine, turpenoid, any of those things down the sink. You can let it evaporate, and even on your rags, you want to get your rags aired out so they don't combust. So, you know, turpentine is very combustible. Then having a focal point. And the focal point, like for this painting, would be right here. It's where our eye is drawn to. It's the number 1 leader of the band. This certainly isn't the focal point. This isn't. You know, the tree is pretty interesting, but our eye keeps going back here. So that's what we mean by a focal point. Your landscape should reflect something about you. You know, where do you want to go, or where have you been, or what place do you love? You know, look outside the window. There's a beautiful landscape here. And you need to use brush and palette knife. We've done that before, so you now know how to incorporate both of those. So each painting is worth 20 points. So that's your little score sheet. So sample sheet number 1. Make sure you put your name on these. And we're doing soft clouds. So the thing about soft is use a softer brush. You know, if your brush is nice and soft, like this brush is very soft, I can really get soft blending. So if you're using a really hard brush, it's a lot more work to blend it. The other thing is wipe your brush off frequently. You know, if your brush has a lot of paint in, every time you put it down, maybe you get more blue than you want, or here's a mark that you've left because you have so much paint, it's going to be harder to blend. So blend that out, dry your brush, blend it out, dry your brush, blend it out, dry your brush. So when we say soft clouds, we don't want anything defined, no sharp, crisp edges. Soft, soft, soft. So that's this one, and you can use right here on your paper, of course. Or if you don't have this in front of you, you can use other paper, whatever's convenient. Clouds, dramatic clouds, those are clouds that have a lot of contrast. Anytime we say something is dramatic, it's going to have dark darks and light lights, and it's going to have edges that show. So we're not probably going to use a soft brush. You can use a crisper brush, one that's stiffer. And for this, you're going to definitely have to wipe off your brush because as you put these shapes in, For example, the white, if I go into this, oh, it picked up so much blue. Now this is blue. Okay, where can I use up that blue? But any place where I want pure white, I need to clean my brush off or even clean it with paint thinner so I have nice clean whites. And down here with the dark blue, I might do that last because then my brush doesn't have so much blue, I'm wasting it. So see the crisp edge? Very different than this soft one, isn't it? So we want very crisp, dramatic. The whole sky doesn't have to have that cloud, but somewhere in the sky. Because when you look at the sky, the clouds are all different. They're not all cookie cutters. They're not all round circles. And we certainly don't want this kind of elementary cloud. 3 humps and 3 exact shapes. It looks really boring. It looks too elementary. So you want your clouds some softer edges, some crisp edges, some lighter in color, some more faded out, maybe some really dramatic that have the bright whites, the bright blues, even some blacks or grays in them. And clouds, as you know, sunsets can be pink and orange and purple and lavender. So you can pick some clouds that you want to do and use in your landscape. So softer, we know we have to blend it out. Crisper, the paint is going to be thicker, drier, and we're going to use a stiffer brush. Clouds here with a hard edge. Once again, it's like our dramatic clouds, but we're going to definitely see an edge. So it has a crispness to it. It's very different than the soft cloud, isn't it? Okay, so these are the 3 clouds I want you to practice, and your sky will have a combination of those clouds. So it won't be all soft, it won't be all hard, it won't be all dramatic, a variety. Next, trees in the distance. I'm going to have you come down here. Please do not do trees like this. This green is way too bright. Things in the distance are always more hazy, lighter, foggier, fuzzier, less defined. This bright green is way too bright. That is for trees close up, not trees in the distance. Now these, where the trees start to fade, is better. And this, where the trees are much smaller, is even better. Everything in the background needs to be smaller, less defined. Compared to these trees are good examples of trees closer to us. So they're more defined. Here's the branches we can see. There's more contrast. There's dark greens. There's light greens. There's yellow green. There's some whites. And some of these little tiny branches fade out. These trunks that are all the same really look too elementary. Don't make all your trunks the same. Even if your picture has them the same, look, this is very wide. These branches have variety. Nature is so wonderful at doing these. This branch is not as thick as this. This gets thinner, thinner, thinner. So we want a variety. The same is true when you do your trees. So here's a tree. The tree trunk gets smaller, and this green could definitely have more colors of green instead of just one green in it. It makes this look kind of blocky, but breaking it up with some branches is good. This tree is actually very nice because it has a variety in the foliage. Up here, the brown of the trunk fades out. There's little hints of it, and you can definitely feel that that tree is up close. So that covers these 2 things of trees in the distance and trees up close. They should not be the same color. So the trees in the back, lighter, you can tone them down with white, you can tone them down with gray, make them much less intense, not super intense like this. This technique we've already been using is called slide and glide. And this is a technique that I'm going to demonstrate. We're going to come over to my palette and I can show you this right now. So this is a technique that's used all the time. And a lot of times when you have an edge, and you can use any brush for this. I might use a little bigger brush. I'm going to see if this is soft. It is. So it's been cleaned out. I'm going to get a little bit of thinner on my brush just to wet it down a little bit. And slide and glide is where I'm holding my hand down and I'm actually sliding along an edge. So I can get a nice edge. You know, I see students that are trying to do an edge and they're going like this with their brush. It's a lot harder, and that edge looks ragged. It looks irregular. So use the advantage of your brush. And look how I'm bracing my arm on the canvas or the pellet so I can slide and glide. This is a technique that you will use when you're trying to create an edge. Now my turpentine is a little too wet in this and it's starting to go outside of the line, so I can simply come back and bring it in. I wanted to show you also that this brush, or this tube of paint right here, a brush punctured this tube so it has a hole in it. And I need to use this paint up because I can wrap it with some plastic, which will help, but once this is dried up, this is not like watercolor. I can't just add turpentine to it and rejuvenate it. So once you have a broken tube, try to use that up if you can. You know, you can wrap it, try to make it airtight, but this is going to end up getting hard fast. So I'm going to use this tube up. This happens to be Prussian blue, and it's a very intense blue. So while we're here, I wanted to show you. So here I have some of my white paint. So you can see this Prussian blue is really gorgeous, but it is very strong. It's a very strong blue. So if I am trying to mix into it, like we've talked about before, here's my white. Say I want to make a lighter blue. I go into the white, I go into the lightest color and add a little bit of my darker color into the white. I never would try to put all this white into this blue. It would just take it over. This is too dominant. So if I want to lighten up my Prussian, I'm going to go in to the white because I already have some Prussian blue on my brush. Sometimes people can get really frustrated because they can't get the color they want. So know this is worth its weight in gold. You always put the white aside, and I can take a little bit of white. I can do this with my palette knife. I can put it to the side, and I can add a dark color into the light. So it takes over really fast. So hopefully that's the right color I'm going for. If I want it darker, of course it's easy to just add a dark. If I want it lighter, what I would actually do is take another pile of white over here and just add a little bit of that blue to the white so we can get it even lighter. So that way you're not going to waste a ton of paint and a ton of time doing this project. Okay, so there's slide and glide. You're sliding it along. Here is how to mix, again, just a little refresher to always use your lightest color and add a little bit of dark into that. And don't forget, a palette knife is great for mixing paint because we're not wasting so much paint. Like on my brush, if I'm using this to mix, I have a lot of paint in my brush that I might not be able to use, but with my palette knife, I can really get in there and I can use every little bit of it. So for this landscape, you're going to want to use some areas with palette knife and some areas with the brush. So the palette knife is better for areas that are going to be thick because it's really easy to put it on thick, but you can also smooth it. Maybe you don't want a lot of brush strokes showing. Now with the brush, I can also pile the paint on with the brush, but I get a different effect, don't I? Okay. Now, so we've talked about slide and glide, and of course you can do that using more than one color. So it doesn't have to just be blue or just one color, white. Or whatever the color is, you can use more than one color for slide and glide. So here you can see this is dark green with a brown in it, and here is a lighter green. So you can keep adding more colors and blending with it. This next one is water. So depending on the effect of the water, if you want it to be more dramatic, Once again, we use that word dramatic. Are you going to get some darks and lights? It's much more interesting, but maybe you want water that's very soft and delicate. So this is your choice. Next, impressionistic. And what we mean by that, there are the impressionistic painters. And you may know Claude Monet. He's one of the most famous impressionists. So this technique, where everything is not super defined, is put on loosely. It's not over blended. You kind of blend it by when you stand back and your eye fills it in and starts to blend it. So Claude Monet is one of the artists who made the impressionistic movement famous. You may know his name. He's very famous, obviously deceased, and he was famous for doing water lilies. So for this technique, some part of your painting needs to be impressionistic. So when we say impressionistic, what I'm saying is here these colors can be softly blended. They're not totally blended, though, are they? Or you can put in dots and spots of color, which is very impressionistic. There can be dots or rows of color that also lends itself to that impressionistic look. Or it can even be a variety of the same color in darks and lights. So that creates a very impressionistic feeling. Next are roads. Okay, this road is okay. It's not bad, but it is such an arrow leading you out of the painting so quickly. Look how much more interesting this is when it curves, when the roads curve. It keeps you more involved. This technique is not what we're going for, because even though it's darker here and lighter and fuzzier here, which is good, we like that, it just zooms us off the page. So you want us to stay meandering in your painting. And we don't have to see the whole road. It can start and stop. There could be something covering up part of the road. You decide. But I'd like you to avoid this kind of look. Okay, next we have a water with reflections, this square right here. So here you can see that these trees are reflected in the water. They're broken up very impressionistically. Excuse me. Here there's a tree reflected. Here another very impressionistic, once again, reflection of these trees in the distance. So these colors are repeated in some way. So you decide. The reflection is never exactly a mirror of the image. It's close, but we want it broken up. We don't want it to look like it's a cookie cutter, that this tree is just flipped over and it looks exactly the same. The edges should be softer and less defined. Next, mountains. I really enjoy this mountain because it's so irregular. It's not just the regular mountains we see like this that are so often drawn. There's 3 teepees, 3 triangle shapes, and this is too much the same color. We would never see this in nature, but look at how much more interesting this is by having a variety of colors. You know, browns and yellow ochres and greens and a dark brown, a burnt sienna. This is what I'm going for. I want something more irregular. Now this one, I like that they put the mountain here and not just this broken off mountain here. Because this is almost a stereotype of what we see or think of as mountains. So I want yours to be more interesting than that. The next one, hills. Like I was saying before, everything in the distance is fuzzier, hazier, softer. So we definitely can feel this distance being created. Things up close, we can see the details, we can see the blacks, we can see the outlining, but as things go in the distance, they always get lighter. So these are some things that I want you to think about for your landscape. So I want you to go ahead and get started. Get your photographs, practice the techniques, figure out your thumbnail, and get started. This is Julia Noyes. Thank you.